Rick Rosen from WCCO TV, and it's my pleasure to introduce my good friend Ron Henderson, the Fitness King, presenting Motivation, one word to help change your life.
Hi, I'm Ron Henderson, aka the Fitness King, and welcome to Motivation. I'm extremely excited about today's show because I have a young man that is just so talented that you can't believe that he's on Motivation. Yes, I have the one and only Yakasah Wehyee on Motivation. He is the new city council member, right, for Falcon Heights. Welcome to Motivation.
Thank you so much.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, this is a pleasure. So you're 28 years of age, and you're now you're the first Somali, I believe, in Falcon Heights.
First Liberian.
Liberian?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. So first Liberian of Falcon Heights, and you're 28 years of age.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have an interesting story, and I want to get into that because I want to find out why you even decided to run for councilman, and what do you plan on doing. But before we talk about that, can we get up close and personal?
Absolutely.
Okay. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in North Minneapolis.
Okay.
And I graduated high school from St. Francis, Minnesota. So yeah.
So you grew up in North Minneapolis.
Yeah.
But you have people from Liberia?
Yeah. So I was born in Liberia, and when I was born, there was a civil war going on in Liberia. So my family and I fled to Ivory Coast, and we lived on the refugee camps in Ivory Coast.
What was that like? Were you too young to remember?
No, I could definitely remember. It was very tough. You know, we used to live in a very small house with a lot of siblings, a lot of cousins, extended family, and things like that.
And what was that like?
I mean, it was really tough. It was tough, but you know, what sustained us really was, you know, the love that we have for each other, and knowing that together we could get through it. And we did have support from the U.S. You know, we had some family in the U.S. that would send us some money to help us, you know, get food from time to time, and so those things helped us. But I think above all, you know, just sort of staying true to each other and sort of being committed as a family. You know, that's kind of how we survived.
Right. Can I ask you this question, because I've actually never asked this. What was it like, a typical breakfast like? You know, when you say you didn't have much.
Yeah.
Give me an example. What's a typical breakfast like?
Well, you know, in those days, we didn't have sort of your standard 3 meals a day. You know, you ate when food was available. So, you know, we didn't necessarily, you know, sort of gather around for breakfast time or something like that. But, you know, so there really wasn't a typical in that sense, you know, from what I could recall, you know, I think the big meal that we did have was probably, I think, maybe dinner. But yeah, you know, sometimes we would go, you know, 1 meal a day, sometimes 2 meals a day, and you know, sometimes we'd have to go a couple. You know, so so there was really not a typical sort of schedule in that regard. Yeah.
So I asked that because growing up, we would have like cereal or malto-meal, cornflakes, and we'd didn't have a lot of money, so we Carnation instant milk, that powdered milk with water.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that?
No, I don't think so.
Right. And we thought it was really rough, but I always ask people that, especially people from foreign countries, because one thing that I always noticed, it seems like people that had less were happier than the people that had a lot. Because I went to Ethiopia and I noticed that the poor people, they were just smiling all the time. They were great to be around.
Yeah. Well, I think when you come from poverty, I think there's a greater appreciation for people, because you rely on your social network, right? Whereas when you come from a place of privilege, it's more individualistic, right? You can kind of rely on your own capital to be able to sort of do things in the world. But when you're poor, you know, the family becomes a lot more prominent. You know, the extended family becomes a lot more prominent. And certainly, family and extended family is a pillar of African society, and I think even just societies outside of the West, even in terms of their emphasis on not only the nuclear family but also the extended family network. So I think there might be some truth to that.
Right. So then you came to the United States. You end up in Minnesota. Okay. So then what happened from there? Because you're very articulate and intelligent. Yeah. So where did you get your education?
Yeah, so I got educated for most of my life in the Minneapolis public school systems. I went to Shingle Creek Elementary School.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you do? Okay. It's not around anymore, but that's where I went.
Where was that at again?
It's like on the border of Brooklyn Center and Minneapolis.
Right.
Yeah, so I went to Shingle Creek Elementary. I went to Osen Middle School. I went to Edison High School for a year. And then after that, I moved to St. Francis, Minnesota, where I ended up graduating from high school. And there is when I got politically active, actually.
Okay. So let's back up a little bit. So going back to high school,
Yeah.
how were you received?
In general,
Being from a different,
Yeah, well, initially it was kind of tough because, I had just left what I knew in terms of, family, friends, and everything like that,
Right.
leaving Ivory Coast in Africa and coming here. And so, it was the adjustment was a little tough. And so I was kind of quiet initially for the first few years of being here. And of course, I had to deal with, people calling you names and things like that because you look different, you sound different, and you maybe smell different and things like that.
Right.
But after some time, I started opening up more, and people really took a liking to me. I actually was kind of always pretty popular in school, so people wanted to be around me, especially when I started opening up more and started showing my personality
And your talents?
Yeah, my talents and things like that. So I think some people might have had it harder than me in terms of having to deal with bullying and things like that. Some people attempted to do those things, but it wasn't sort of a prolonged thing that I constantly had to deal with. Oh my gosh, I'm constantly being bullied. So it wasn't quite like that. I had a lot of friends that would stick up for me and that I would also stick up for and things like that. So I didn't have to deal with so much of that. But obviously there are cultural differences that one has to sort of adjust to growing up in a completely new society.
Right. So when did you first, when did you first get an interest in community events and politics? Where did that come up?
Yeah. So, my dad, prior to the Civil War in Liberia, my dad was actually in the Liberian police force. And he was also a part of like local politics and things like that.
Okay.
And he was, pretty well known in his circle.
Right, so policeman
Yeah.
and politics.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
but I wasn't around when that
Okay.
when that was going on. But I would hear those stories,
Okay.
and of course, when you're a kid, your dad is your idol, and my dad continues to be my idol. And so, I used to always kind of hear those stories, and I used to sort of fantasize what it might be like, or what it might have been like, seeing my dad in that role, and ultimately what potentially I could be, and so perhaps subconsciously that might have played a role. But in general, I've kind of always had an interest in helping people. Even growing up or being in Africa, I used to see, poverty was kind of all over. That was my reality,
Right.
But even at that very young age, I used to always wonder to myself, like, why is it that, some people are living these conditions? Is this how the world is generally? And then of course,
I always thought that.
Right, and then of course I came to the U.S. and started experiencing different things and going to different neighborhoods and realizing that, well, no, it's not like that for everyone. Everyone is not living in abject poverty. You do have some people who are living better off. Then naturally the next question becomes, but why is that?
Right.
And so these sort of questions drove me to try to really understand how these systems were sort of established, and how and why they're perpetuated. And from that, I think I became sort of infatuated with trying to dismantle some of those institutions that sort of keep some down and while others are sort of thriving.
Right, and how did you do that?
Well, I saw politics as a means to do so. So first, before I get to that, so music was actually one of my first passions.
Really?
Yeah, and I've always been very sensitive to music and lyrics and things like that. Always, since I was a kid, I would listen to a song and sort of innately be able to relate and relate to the message. When other kids probably would have totally ignored it. And I used to, and I still continue to sort of be attracted to music with sort of social messages.
Yes, yes.
Lucky Dube, for instance, is one of my all-time favorite musicians. And if you know anything about Lucky Dube's music, he talks about, apartheid.
Right.
He talks about social injustice. He talks about poverty, and talks about alcoholism. All these really sort of weighty topics. These are the messages that he talked about.
Right.
And so those are the type of things that I've always been sort of inclining towards. And so that was one thing. So
Do you sing?
I don't sing, but I write rap music.
Oh, you do?
Actually, yeah. So
You do spoken word?
I do a little bit of spoken word, but
What have you done recently?
nothing recently.
Folks, I'm putting them on the spot.
Nothing. I haven't done anything recently. But
You didn't do one when you found out that you were a council person, that you won? Like,
No. No. So for me, I used to. So actually, rap was actually a way for me to kind of navigate like the inner cities. Like for me to, because when you grow up in an environment like North Minneapolis, you have to have an outlet for self-expression. And if you don't, well, you're gonna express yourself in other ways.
Right, yeah.
And so for me, one thing I did really early on, like from the 5th grade and until I left from Minneapolis, was I had a rap group actually.
Okay.
The Wildcats is what we were called, and we used to get together and write lyrics and practice and go to the recording studio, and this would sort of occupy our time, right? So that we're not sort of getting
Something
into
positive.
Exactly, so that we're not getting in trouble and things like that. And I've done that, and I did that for a number of years. And so from that, I was able to really cultivate my voice, really, and be able to really express myself. So that's a side thing. But in terms of how I got involved in politics, so I just discussed how listening to socially conscious music sort of inspired me, right? And when I moved to St. Francis, I started getting involved in things that I never got involved in before when I lived in Minneapolis, such as student council, such as speech, soccer, things that if I would have done when I was in Minneapolis, I probably would have been called weird for or something like that, And actually, let me backtrack a little bit. When I was at Edison, the former mayor of Minneapolis, R.T. Ryback, visited the school, and I was a really cynical kid because, again, I was listening to music that's Rage Against the System and all these different sort of messages. So my perspective of politics wasn't exactly positive. And so I was kind of in the corner, pouty, off-putting a little. And the mayor came over to me, and he sat down next to me. He talked to me for just maybe a minute or two or something like that. And from that conversation, I realized that, there are perhaps some good people in politics, and that politics is not, always a negative thing.
Yeah, there's good people in everything.
Exactly. But of course, I didn't see that until that conversation. And then around the same time, this was when Barack Obama was actually campaigning to become president.
Right.
And so I had some teachers that told me about this charismatic guy that's running for president, and I should look into it. And of course, I did look into it, and I became inspired by President Barack Obama, or then candidate Barack Obama. And actually, when Barack Obama became president, the following year, I also became the president of student council.
Okay.
And I became the first black vice president and president of student council in St. Francis. So, there was some pretty interesting parallel there. And so I just kind of saw this as a really cool sort of opportunity for me to pursue this sort of thing further. And more critically, I saw politics sort of as an avenue for me to be able to do the type of work that I wanted to do, which of course is to help people and try to make life a little better than what it was when I came into it.
Right. Why do you care?
I care because I think we're obligated to care for other people, not only human beings, but life in general, If I don't care, who's gonna care, My attitude is, people always sort of make the argument that, we can't fix everything, and I'm just one person, I can't do that. But it's like, if we all adopt that philosophy, then we wouldn't be where we are today.
Exactly.
So somebody has to care, and
Exactly.
and for me, my perspective is why not me? Why not me?
Right.
And why not you?
Exactly.
So
exactly. And so when did you decide that you were actually going to run for city council?
So I didn't initially plan on running for city council.
Were you pushed into it?
I was actually.
I've had people trying to push me into running for office.
I kind of was. My wife was actually responsible for me running in a sense, you know.
Behind every successful man is a wife.
Yes, and she's great.
Okay.
And so, so what happened was, so I'm doing my PhD, and so my plan was to actually, you know, finish my PhD and then consider other options for.
Yeah, we can call you Dr. Councilman, right?
So, but you know, I was at a stage where I had concluded all of my my coursework. I had taken and passed my qualifying exams,
right.
And so you know, I had some leeway to do different things. And as you may know, you know, when you're in academia, sometimes you become isolated from the broader society, right? Because you're so into the books and things like that, you kind of may lose sight of what's actually happening in the community around you. And I've always been a very community-oriented person, so that made me a little uneasy. And my wife saw that, and she said, "Well, why don't you just run for city council?"
Okay.
And I said, "Well, let's look into it." And so we looked into it, and we saw what the political climate was.
Sure.
You know, we looked at the priorities of the city. And one thing that really touched me and sort of motivated me to really put my hat in the race was, you know, the city's commitment to cultivate a more caring and more inclusive community. And of course, this is something that I've always been a part of and trying to help advance. And so I said, you know what, I can get behind that. You know, this is something that I think my public speaking skills, my community organizing skills, and my people skills in general. I think these skills will really help the city, you know, meet those goals. And then I, you know, started meeting with stakeholders, various people that had been doing work in the city, work in the community, to get a sense of, you know, what issues, what specific issues are important to the city, and what has been done, what needs to continue to be done, what needs to still be done, and things like that. And after sort of making all those considerations, you know, we decided that, you know, we can do it. Yeah.
Well, you didn't win on your own, so how did you get a team together to help you with this? I mean, you got to get out and put posters and signs up. So
again, you know, the first and the most important person that I recruited was my wife.
Yeah, of course.
She,
of course.
You know, my wife, she did our signage, she did our logo, she did our website. You know, she did a lot.
What's your wife's name?
Her name is Isha.
Isha, hello Isha.
Yes, hi Isha. So yeah, she did all of that. So she was definitely the first person, and she was like, and she continues, and she will always be my number one sort of advocate.
Sure. Was it hard getting a crew together too? Because I may run for office someday. I may run against you. I may move to Falcon Heights.
Man, I might lose if you do that. Don't do it.
So was it hard getting a crew together? Just briefly.
Yeah, you know, I don't think it was too difficult, because again, you know,
you're a likable guy.
I'm a likable guy, you know, and then on top of that, I think most people that really that know me, that have been around me, know that, you know, I've been in these sort of roles, and it wasn't a surprise to a lot of people when I declared. And so, you know, when I said, hey, when I reached out to somebody and said, hey, I'm running, you know, people were very receptive. You know, I tapped into my network of friends. You know, I enlisted the help of, you know, Tasha Silver that I went to school with, Heather Hammond that I also went to school with, you know, Tony Sterrell. I didn't know Tony from anywhere. He was actually recommended to me by another good friend of mine, Parks Commissioner, Minneapolis Park Commissioner Latricia Vital recommended him to me, and so, you know, we met and they obviously supported my message and my candidacy, and so then we just developed a strategy and we just kind of carried that forward.
Well, next time you run for an office, you call me.
Okay. And
we'll put your campaign on my show for nothing.
Okay.
How's that?
I like that.
Because you're going to be moving. You're going to be moving up. You're going to be moving up.
Wow. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
We'll do that. So, what's your vision?
Yeah.
For Falcon Heights.
So my vision really revolves around the vision that the city had already sort of established in the wake of Philando Castillo's killing.
Right.
And following that tragic incident, Falcon Heights made a commitment to cultivating a more caring and more inclusive community for all of its residents, but also everyone that visits the city.
Yes.
And so I really took that platform by the horn, and I essentially ran with that. And I think that's the vision that we can all coalesce around. And I think that should be sort of the vision that governs what we do for the foreseeable future, for sure.
Right.
And so the city's been very intentional about creating opportunities to bring people together in the community, to sort of introduce neighbors together and really cultivate a sense of community,
right.
and sort of connect different parts of the city that historically have been sort of isolated from each other. For instance, I am not only the youngest, but I'm also the first, at least that I'm aware of, council member that is still currently living in rental housing. And I think, that's a voice that has historically been underappreciated or underrepresented on city council. And so just kind of having that perspective is very important as well.
How did you feel when you won?
I felt great. I was extremely excited, but I was also pretty overwhelmed, to be honest, because just a few hours prior to the actual announcement, I was a virtual nobody. I was just living my life, doing my thing, hanging out with my dogs, my cat, and my wife. And then I win, and the entire Liberian community knows about it just instantaneously.
Facebook.
Yeah.
Social media.
Exactly, and everyone's reaching out to me. Everyone's excited.
Oh yeah.
And that I was very excited about that, but then I was also like, oh my gosh, it was too much stimulus, And so I actually ended up falling sick for a couple of days, and but I recovered, and I'm in good spirits now, and I'm looking forward to actually going to New Orleans for a couple of days with my wife to kind of take a little break and then come back to really, to kind of recuperate from the campaign, and then come back to really start the work.
Oh yeah, and I understand that the first time I ran an ad for personal training was almost 40 years ago. I had 35 to 40 calls come in that day that the ad came out. I was totally overwhelmed. Yeah. I didn't call a lot of people back. I was like overwhelmed. And these people want me to come and train because they had never had anybody going out to their homes training them. Right. And I probably had about 10 people I didn't call back. Yeah. It was overwhelming for me to see the response, and here it is 40 years later, and I'm still training people. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. And hundreds and hundreds of messages on Facebook, and I'm just like, so I had to do the very generic thing of, thank you everyone for your well wishes and congratulations, because there's no way that I would have been able to respond to everybody. Exactly. That's what you want to do. Was it a close race? Well, the thing is, there were 2 open seats, and so there were 3 people running for the 2 open seats, and 2 of us won. Okay. And the 2 of us that won, we won by pretty close margins. Right. I think I got 44%, she got 43%, Kay Andrews. Right. But the other candidate got about, I think, 11%. Right. So it was uncompetitive with the candidate that didn't get elected, obviously. Right. But between Kay and I, it was pretty close. Right. But again, we weren't necessarily directly competing against each other because there were 2 open seats. Okay. So. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. In the next 30 seconds. Yeah. In the next 30 seconds, why were you the perfect person for the job as council member? Yeah. Well, I think I offer a perspective that has, until now, hasn't necessarily been represented on city council. Being a young immigrant living in rental housing. Right. Those are 3 very big things that are important, but that haven't necessarily been represented on city council. But apart from those things, I think I connect well with people. I have the ability to talk and relate to people from different sort of perspectives. And the reason for that, I think, I attribute it to the fact that I've had the privilege
to live in different types of communities.
Yes.
I think we were talking earlier about
yeah.
coming what it means to like to navigate a predominantly white space.
Oh yes.
I did that. Living in St. Francis, for instance, but also living with Caucasian the Caucasian family.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm able to sort of communicate, I think, quite effectively with different people and really understand and put myself in the shoes of different people.
Right.
And so I think that relatability is really what has carried me to this point.
Right. And you do a nice job. We were talking earlier. I want to just say something to the viewing audience. There's so much going on right now with shootings by young men, and some of these are even young women. And if you really are concerned about, slowing these things down or having them stop, as a parent, as a mom, as a dad, do your part, because it really does start with you. It's how you raise your kids, how you treat your kids, how you talk to your kids. Train them up properly, and they won't be doing some of the things that they're doing. I believe that 100%, because if people are putting it on society, but it's really, you're the parents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't expect my kids to curse somebody out because they weren't raised that way.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I encourage you to do your job. I want to just say it's a pleasure having you on Motivation.
Absolutely.
Great
Thank
job.
you so much.
You're looking at the new council member for Falcon Heights.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on Motivation. Folks, and all that you do, stay fit, stay blessed, and keep watching Motivation. We're going to see you next time. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy and so proud to announce that today we made history, becoming the youngest and first candidate elected to the Falcon Heights City Council living in rental housing. I want to say thank you to my campaign team for structuring and carrying out the most organized, the most professional campaign that Falcon Heights has seen in recent history. I also want to say thank you to my friends, family, and supporters living in Falcon Heights and abroad. I'm extremely excited to start working for my community in this new capacity come January. I'm going to turn this off right now and do a celebration dance. Thank you.
To book Ron Henderson for your next event, call 612-386-8178 or send an email to ron@fitnessking.com. That's ron@fitnessking.com.